Today we will discuss on the reptilian order Rhynchocephalia, which comes under the subclass Lepidosauria according to the newer classification of reptilia, and according to the older classification they come under the subclass Diapsida, and they are also called as beak-headed reptiles as it is evident from the anterior region of their head. The snout looks like a beak, and they were common in the Mesozoic era, and they lived in the middle Triassic period some 238 to 240 million years ago. So they were the contemporaries of dinosaurs, but now they are represented by a single surviving genus, and the name of the genus is Sphenedon. So you can consider it to be a monotypic group because there is only one genus, that is Sphenedon. It is seen only in New Zealand, and that too restricted to some 30 small islands off the main coast of New Zealand. And earlier they were found in abundance in the mainland, but later they got threatened. Their existence got threatened by habitat loss and because of the introduction of certain species such as carnivorous mustelids and rats. And we come to the common names. It is called as tuatara by the local people there, which means that there are peaks on the back. This represents the spiny crest on the mid-dorsal line of the body, and it is also called as Hatteria, and this is considered to be the oldest non-living reptile, and it is also known as the living fossil because its contemporaries are now extinct, but this is the only living reptile which is seen from that period itself, and it has survived evolutionary changes and it remains unmodified, retaining many primitive characteristics, and so it is called as a living fossil. And there are two recognized species in this genus. They are Sphenedon punctatus and Sphenedon guntheri, and this Sphenedon guntheri is a vulnerable species in the IUCN red list. Now coming to their mode of life, they are burrowing forms, and their burrows are peculiar in that they are consisting of a network of interconnected tunnels, and they are mostly nocturnal in habit. They show a bit of sexual dimorphism where the males are found to be larger and heavier than females, and they show a typical plantigrade progression. That means when they move, their whole sole will be touching the ground while walking. So while they walk, we can see that the whole sole is touching the ground. So they are typical to show plantigrade progression, and the body is characterized by the presence of a dorsal crest with erect spines all throughout the body except the neck region, and this spiny crest is often exhibited in colors during mating by the males. Then they possess acrodont teeth, and unlike the snakes and lizards, they do not have forked tongue, though they are related to the suborder Squamata. They do not have a forked tongue, and they follow a carnivorous diet which consists of arthropods, earthworms, snails, birds, lizards, small lizards, frogs, etc. And another feature is the presence of large eyes, and these large eyes are characterized by the presence of a vertical pupil. Here you can see the pupil is vertical, and the eyes are also protected by a nictitating membrane. An important feature of Sphenedon is the presence of a parietal organ or a pineal eye, which is considered to be the third eye. It is located in the parietal foramen in the cranial roof. This is usually seen in young ones, but after months of their hatching out, this organ gets scale covered in adults. So the function is unknown. Then ear openings are absent, or a functional tympanum is also absent, but they have got inner ear, so they can show some sound frequency response from around 100 to 800 hertz. And they show autotomy. That means like lizards, they are able to cut or mutilate their tail on encounter with an enemy. And one feature that makes them different from lizards is that they show an unmodified diapsid skull. In lizards come under Diapsida, but they have got a modified diapsid skull with only supratemporal fossa remaining. Whereas in Sphenedon skull, both the fossae are intact. You can see the supratemporal fossa as well as the infratemporal fossa. So, this is typical diapsid skull without modification. Just like crocodiles, they have got uncinate processes, that is backward processes arising from the ribs. And in them, the kidneys are metanephric, just like lizards, but an urinary bladder is also present. In crocodiles, we could see that urinary bladder was absent, whereas here the urinary bladder is present. And we come to their mating behavior. So, during mating time, the male will take a renewed appearance, that is, its skin becomes darker, it will raise its crest and it shows a parade around the female. But here, during mating, we can see one peculiar phenomenon, that the males lack copulatory organs, whereas in other groups of reptilia we could see the presence of copulatory organs either paired or unpaired in the male organisms, but in Sphenedon the copulatory organs are rudimentary. They have got a rudimentary hemipenis which cannot be used for sperm transfer. So, how are sperms transferred? So, here we can see mating, which is actually a lengthy process which can extend up to 1 hour, and during copulation the male will be seen mounted on the top of the female. And how the sperm transfer occurs? There is no copulatory organ. Instead, they will undergo a cloacal contact between each other. The cloaca of the male and female will be opposed to each other so that sperms are transferred. It is also called as cloacal kissing. And just like lizards and snakes, their cloacal slit is transverse, unlike the longitudinal slit which is present in chelonians and crocodiles. The sphenodons, like other reptiles, are oviparous forms which lay at least 5 to 18 eggs at a time, and the egg laying occurs only once in around 4 years. So, it is less frequent. The eggs are cleidoic, that means shelled, and macrolecithal, that means they are having abundant quantity of yolk. And Sphenodon is peculiar in that it is showing the longest incubation period in any reptilian group, because the incubation period lasts for about 12 to 15 months, after which only the eggs hatch out. And the sex is temperature dependent, that means the sex of a young one depends upon the temperature of the egg, incubation temperature. That is, eggs which get hatched at warmer temperatures will tend to produce more males, and cooler temperatures tend to produce more females. Here parental care is absent and the young ones have to fend for their own, they have to fend for themselves. Like the chelonians and crocodiles, they have got a caruncle or the egg tooth, so as to come out of the egg to break open the egg shell. And their development is also very slow, that means to reach adult size and get sexual maturity, it takes a span of around 20 years. And here you can see a juvenile tuatara. And we come to the affinities of the Sphenodon with other groups. So, we will just check the lizard-like features. It much resembles a lizard in its external morphology, because its body has got the head, trunk, neck and tail, and the body is scale covered, and the tail is long and flat, and the digits are pentadactyl and clawed. So, it is having an external morphology which is similar to that of a lizard. Then the presence of transverse cloacal slit, and another feature is the ability to mutilate their tail and regenerate the lost tail, and this is because of the presence of certain discs, cartilaginous septa in between the centrum, in the centrum, in the middle of the centrum of caudal vertebrae, there are cartilaginous septa which will facilitate breaking of the tail or which will facilitate autotomy. That is seen in lizards also. So, the centrum of caudal vertebrae are divided by a cartilaginous septum which allows autotomy. The pelvis is also just like that of a lizard with ilium, ischium and pubis. The respiratory organs are similar, the anatomy of the lung is similar to that of a lizard. The presence of pineal eye can also be seen in lizards, and pineal eye is the eye-like structure which is seen on the top of the head, which is located in the parietal foramen, and the blood vascular system is also alike. The aortic arches almost remain the same. Now we come to certain primitive features of Sphenodon. So even though they resemble lizards, they also show similarities with other reptilian groups which are considered to be primitive, because they show some characteristics which are similar to that of Crocodilia and Chelonia. We will just check out what they are. One is the presence of infratemporal fossa. In lizards, it has been lost. It is an evolutionary modification in lizards, but Sphenodon has not subjected to that modification. Second is the presence of a hard palate like the crocodilians. Third is that their quadrate is immovable or monomostylic, whereas in lizards the quadrate is streptostylic or movable. So monomostylic quadrate can be considered to be an affinity with the crocodilian group. They also possess a proatlas in front of the first vertebra, and the vertebrae are amphicoelous, unlike the lizards who have procoelous vertebrae. Now, just like dinosaurs, they possess an unbroken row of chevron bones in their tail vertebrae. The ribs are double-headed, unlike that of lizards. They have got elaborate ribs in the abdominal vertebrae. From the abdominal vertebrae, you will be seeing elaborate ribs. Uncinate processes are present in the ribs, just like crocodiles. And in both lizards and Sphenodon possess ilia in pelvic girdle, but the difference is that in lizards the ilia are backwardly directed, whereas in Sphenodon the ilia are erect. Then they have got the upper arm bone or the humerus with end epicondylar and ect epicondylar foramina that you can see here. This is also considered to be a primitive characteristic, the presence of this end epicondylar foramen and the ect epicondylar foramen in the upper arm bone known as the humerus. They also possess gastralia. This feature is seen in crocodiles and Sphenodon. They are dermal bones or membrane bones which are seen on the ventral body wall, and they are seen between the sternum and the pelvis. They have no articulation with the vertebrae. So these specialized bony structures are called as the gastralia, which are absent in lizards but present in Sphenodon and Crocodilia, and they help in supporting the abdomen, and they also act as attachment sites for abdominal muscles since they are seen on the ventral body wall. Then presence of numerous carpels is also a primitive condition, and the head is longer and neck is shorter compared to the lizards. The sinus venosus is reduced, but in lizards it is well developed. They possess a conus arteriosus, which is the tube which can be considered to be the anteriormost part in vertebrate heart. It is seen as a anterior chamber in the lower vertebrate heart, and this conus arteriosus is a feature which is seen in amphibians, and this Sphenodon also shows a persistent conus which we can consider as a feature which is close to amphibia, showing that it retains primitive characteristics. The aortic arches are also of the primitive type, and they also possess a duct which joins this pulmonary artery with the systemic. This is the left systemic and this is the pulmonary artery, and there is a duct joining them. It is called as ductus botalli, which is also a feature closer to amphibia, which are a primitive group compared to these reptiles. Then the ventricular septum is also poorly developed. This can also be considered to be a feature closer to amphibia, and the absence of copulatory organs and the presence of pineal eye can also be considered to be a primitive character. So these are the characteristics of Sphenodon, which comes under the order Rhynchocephalia.